Welcome to the State of the Nation weekly update. Here we are, late August, and a lot going on in the South African political scene. Just a reminder that the weekly update is proudly driven forward by Pace Car Rental. Use them when next you need to rent a car and get a discount when you book on the website and use our secret code SONA, S-O-N-A. You'll get a discount. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel because here you get some great content. But let's just talk about something that I've been struck with this week. We had a big address recent this week from Mkonto Wesizwe party, and for the first time in a while we had a speech by Jacob Zuma. And this is the same week that we've also heard a lot, if one watches a lot of these news channels, from the American elections. And I can't help. You know, one of those things, once you see it, you can't unsee it. I've got to talk about the similarities between Jacob Zuma and Donald Trump. Now, these guys fall into a category, both Zuma and Trump fall into a category called post-truth populists. They don't deal in the truth. They invent stories and they peddle them as truth. And they're populist. They're popular because they actually literally are kind of conspiracy theorists. They come out with some of the most outrageous statements. And these guys don't have voters. They have dedicated, die-hard fans. So how do they do this? What is the game plan? What is it that they do? Well, for starters, you need to have charisma. You need to pass the beer test, as they say. The guy that you actually want to invite over for a braai, have a beer with him, sit there and chat to him. Now, you can imagine doing that with Jacob Zuma. You can imagine doing that with Donald Trump. Regardless of what your political stance is, they're fun. They look like fun people. They look like guys you want to have there. Look, you can't say the same about President Ramaphosa. I could imagine that he'd be, would not exactly be great company at a braai. That's my impression that I get. Some of these other people, Joe Biden, he'd probably burn his fingers on the braai. But the point is that both of them are loaded with charisma. And that's the starting point. They also have a tremendous backstory. Quite different, but they both have a backstory. And what I mean by a backstory is, you used to have a time when politicians were politicians and they spent a life in politics or in public service, and then they become presidents. But in both cases of Zuma and Trump, they had a life that was quite different to politics. In Jacob Zuma's case, it was the resistance movement, the struggle, as we call it in South Africa. In Donald Trump's case, it was a whole business empire that he inherited. And so there's another point of reference that's not just politics. It's not like they served first as a ward councillor and then a provincial MEC and now they're vying for the job of president. These are people with some kind of story that people will find interesting, right? That's not just politics. And then what is the next step in their game plan? Well, for starters, they are the everyman. They know what you're thinking. They are going to tell you, and they're going to say, guys, we know what they, and it's always like what they want to do to you, and I'm the guy who can save you. And in actual fact, the tie that binds us all is that we are victims. We are victims, victims, victims. You have to keep banging the victim drum. So in the case of Trump, very clearly who his victims are. Well, in his case, he's after the white voters in America. So the victims are the white people that built this place. We're the victims from them. And you don't have to say who them are because everybody can then complete the sentence for you. In Zuma's case, who are the victims? The victims are poor blacks. And who's perpetrating, who's after them? In the case of South Africa, Zuma says, no, the guys that are after you are the whites, and the sellouts from the ANC are working with those whites. So you create this narrative, victim and perpetrator. The one is coming after you, and you're helpless unless you put me between you and them. And this works really well, and it works really well for people that feel victimized. And let's face it, it's not hard for any of us to feel victimized, right? Give the right set of circumstances, the right bit of misinformation, disinformation. Hell, life's hard enough. Sometimes we all feel like somebody's out to get us. But they play this card particularly well. They then invent a history. As I said, they are post-truth populists. So they invent a history. They invent a history where they did a version of what they are promising to do for you. So in the case of Jacob Zuma, the history he's invented is the struggle history. How if it wasn't for him and his intelligence capabilities, it wouldn't have, this wouldn't have happened. I was there. I was in the trenches, even though Jacob Zuma never ever held a gun. Right? He was always a backroom guy. He was always an intelligence guy. He wasn't there at the front line. Trump's one is even more bizarre. He's there for the poor man. This is a guy who was born to a family that was mega rich. He's never worked hard in his life. I don't think he's ever had sweat on his brow or dirt on his feet. And he is out there to protect the poor worker. This imagined story, Trump kind of infers that he sort of pulled himself up by his bootstraps. And it's not true. It's not true. He was gifted something. Zuma was part of a big machinery that eventually brought down the apartheid government, but he was there. So you invent some history. You also lay it on thick. You make those crimes against these people you're trying to save, against us victims, to be far worse than what they were. Right? You really have to make it bad. They were going to kill you all if it wasn't for me. And then, of course, in both cases, because they've both been failed presidents, what you've got to do is you've got to flat out lie about what you did when you were president, right? And the fact that you couldn't complete your term in the case of Zuma, or the fact that you were voted out in the case of Trump, goes to show how much they are after you. So what you do there is you lie flat out about what you did. Listen, if Jacob Zuma really had a problem with the way South Africa was operating, he would have done something about it when he was president, but he did nothing. If he wanted to expropriate land, he was a president with nearly a 2/3 majority. When he got voted in, they had 64% of the vote. He could have co-opted another couple of percent to have changed the constitution, but he was too busy stealing. So this idea that he was a president that was stopped from some kind of mission, yes, he was stopped from some kind of mission, and his mission was to steal as much as possible through state capture. We know, we watched it live on television. But he's invented the story that people have stopped him from fulfilling his mission. The same goes with Donald Trump. Donald Trump says, I was on a mission. I was making America the greatest country in the world. Really? Were you making it the greatest country in the world? What were you trying to do? You were trying to extract deals out of countries like Ukraine, etc. The idea of building the wall, he didn't build any wall. He keeps on saying, if I was president, I would have built the wall. He did nothing for all those years. But yet you just perpetuate the lie. And if people call you out on it, you say, well, yeah, because that just proves, the fact that I didn't do it proves what a victim I am. So it's quite amazing, this playbook. But of course, every victim really, really needs the bad guy, the person who's actually out to get you. So in the case of Trump, who's out to get you? Well, he's picked the lowest of low-hanging fruit, and that is the immigrants, these marauding masses that are going to come over the hill. They're going to rape your women and steal your money, right? And these are the people that have got the least, they are the most defenseless people in America. They don't even have a house. They don't have a gun. They don't have anything. They come over there desperate to make a life for themselves. So they make quite a convenient victim. Much like we saw in the Second World War, you create a victim out of one particular community, everything is their fault. Even though they're a little minority, and eventually it led to, what it led to in World War II, Holocaust type stuff. One wouldn't imagine it'll happen today, but hey, you never know. But you create that victim. And if it wasn't for me stopping that perpetrator, your darling little wife, daughter would get raped by this thing and you're going to get stabbed. Who's the victim in the case of Jacob Zuma? Well, I watched his ramble as MK had a press conference this week. Who's the perpetrator? The white minority. They're the guys. They've plotted this all from the very beginning. They want to stop black South Africans from doing anything. He even said that they haven't built hospitals in rural areas, inferring that somehow whites stopped his government when he was president from building hospitals in rural areas and townships. Now, how does that even work? How would it work? Who would stop the government from building a hospital if they wanted to build a hospital in Khayelitsha? Who would physically stop them? And how? But as long as you say it, and you say it with enough conviction, and you get your sycophants to clap when you say it, it sounds quite believable. What's next? We mentioned the sycophants. This is the group of people I understand the least. Because in both cases of Donald Trump and Jacob Zuma, what you do is you collect a succession, a whole coterie of little fans, absolute sycophants. These are people that would take a bullet for you. They can't do enough for you. But the one thing that they always do is they always knife their sycophants in the back. We've seen this time and time again, right? What we saw with Donald Trump, he comes to power, he's got all these guys that dragged him in there. These were the guys that were doing the media, doing the strategizing, doing the electioneering. He puts them in his cabinet and one by one picks them off. Fires them here, fires them there. We know because you just have to watch any of the international news networks. And there's a whole lot of people that said, geez, I worked with him and the next thing I was fired. Jacob Zuma. He hijacks the MK party, which was somebody else's idea. He gets a whole lot of people on board and one by one he picks them off and he replaces them with new people. And the new people, knowing the fact that he's knifed your predecessor, is there. Next person's there saying, yes, Msholozi, I'm here for you. Do whatever you will with me. And he does. And the best of the lot is that in most cases, he's not the guy who eventually delivers the blow. That's usually done by somebody else, right? The next person, next thing you know, the Secretary General's been fired. Who's done the actual firing? Somebody in the organization. But yet the sycophants line up to take on the job of being the chief cheerleader, knowing, they surely by now must know that they're next, but yet they do it anyway. Right? And then they have this save the country narrative. The save the country narrative is baked in. This is the problem. We're going to hell. Just this week, Donald Trump, in an election speech, said, if you don't vote for me, there's going to be World War III. World War III if you don't vote for me. Right? What's the South African version? If you don't vote for me, they're going to bring back apartheid. The fact that we're talking about 8% of the population, they're going to bring back apartheid. Yeah, right. Explain to me how that's going to work. But you create these narratives. You make desperate people who want to improve their lives and they just want somebody in their corner. And along comes the leader saying, guys, don't worry. I got it. I'll save you. And I'll tell you that you think you're a victim. In actual fact, you're a bigger victim than what you think. And soon enough, the party grows. You create a party in your image. And here you are, a player on the political stage. In the case of Donald Trump, he didn't create a political party because it's hard. America's run a two-party system now for 100 years. What did he do? He took over a political party and recreated it in his image. And you've had people there in the Republican Party in America, grown men, people that in South Africa would say, why don't we have politicians like that? Who were originally unbelievably opposed to this idea, now swearing allegiance to Donald Trump because he's the great big leader, much like we had in the previous Zuma era, where you had, a guy like Trevor Manuel, who fought tooth and nail against having Zuma appointed. And then what did Mr. Manuel decide to do? Well, he joined the Zuma cabinet and said, sorry, Terra Lakota, I know we said we'll start COPE, but sorry, I've had a better offer. And now you're seeing it with people like Floyd Shivambu. Floyd Shivambu, take it from me, it's going to be a very simple thing. Jacob Zuma does not like Floyd Shivambu. We know that from history. And he's going to knife this guy so badly when he's finished doing the organizing of the MK party, he's going to knife the guy. It's the only thing he does. He's going to feel threatened by Shivambu's organizational skills. And pretty soon, he'll be on the way out. So, what do they also do? They collect a little bit of dirt on those people. And that is the knife. That is why the MK party is full of people with criminal charges hanging over their heads. Right? Because that's what an intelligence officer does. You gather information, you find out that person has had affairs, or is a gambler, or he does this, or he does that. You keep that information to yourself, and then when the day comes, you deliver the coup de grace by saying, well, I would love to have kept him there, but who knew that he was a crook? Right? And you've got to sell it. All the time you've got to sell this and say, population, the man in the street, I'm there for you. It's not me, it's them. They're forcing me to do it. I would love to be in Mar-a-Lago with my Eastern European wife. She's not an immigrant because look at her, she was a supermodel, but the rest of them, they're immigrants. Zuma, I wanted to just put my feet up in Kandla, but I've come back to save you. The saving grace is both of them are old. They're not going to last. Now you may be asking, why do I not mention somebody like Julius Malema in this? Well, I think that Julius Malema is quite different. Julius Malema is a sort of a budding dictator. This is a different version that achieves something like this. But hey, he doesn't bend the truth. He shouts the truth. You can like it, not like it. He is not there manipulating people. He's upfront. He tells you what he's going to do. And for that, I'm not the biggest fan, but he's got my respect. But understand that if you're looking for comparisons, Jacob Zuma, Donald Trump are the same. To find a comparison with the Malema, you have to look at Mussolini, Idi Amin, those kind of guys. Right? They were dictators, my way or the highway kind of guys. Not bring them into the tent and then one by one you deal with them. You build your organization. What does this mean for Mkonta Wesizwe? Well, what you had before when Jacob Zuma was president was he was in the ANC that had big structures, guardrails, if you will, that stopped him from doing his worst. And boy, did he destabilize that party. But now there are going to be no guardrails in the MK party. We already know that he's going to sit there and nobody's going to cross him and he's going to run this from the side, but he's never going to allow the organization to settle. He won't allow people to get on with their work because the one thing that he hates the most, and the one thing that Donald Trump hated the most, was somebody else who was competent, somebody else that people wanted to interview, somebody else that people would imagine has a good idea. So any success within the MK party, unless it's from Zuma's family, is going to be met with the cold, hard steel of Jacob Zuma's knife. Good luck to those that think that he's the savior. I can promise you he's not. Thank you for joining us on the State of the Nation. We'll see you again next week.